Oh, hi everyone. It's SPSM Chat. Hello. We are on tonight with Dr. Catherine Gordon, and we are going to be talking about how eating disorders might lead to suicide. And obviously, tonight you are tuning into SPSM Chat, suicide prevention, social media. Thank you, everybody who's here. We are going to go through and do introductions as soon as we can, just flatten out those small little
good save, Marie.
Here we are. And here's your host, Rudy Caseres.
I knew I could count whenever. We'll stop anything possible, okay, for that. If anyone's just joining us for the first time, you probably have no clue what we're talking about. Hi, my name is Rudy Caseres. Welcome to SPSM Chat, Suicide Prevention Social Media. Again, I'm your host, Rudy Caseres, at Rudy Caseres on Twitter. We are also multi-streaming at Facebook.com/SPSM Chat, YouTube.com/SPSM Chat, and Mixer.com/SPSM Chat. I see some cool people. Hey, Tardy. Hey, Marie. Thank you for joining us. So our guest today is Dr. Katie Gordo. She's going to talk about all the cool things that she's doing. Overall, the topic is how eating disorders might lead to suicide. I am so glad that Facebook Live and YouTube Live now have a option to edit live videos, because that's what's going to happen with these. But if you're joining us on Twitter, hello to everyone on Twitter. I appreciate all of you as well, especially if you're on Twitter, our home base. Use the hashtag SPSM and join in on the conversation. If you're on Facebook, just make sure, or on Mixer, just make sure to reply to the original video post that hopefully should be streaming to all of you right now. Same thing with YouTube. So before we get to our guest of the week, our expert guest of the week, let us go around. It's sharing time to our esteemed panel, our wonderful co-hosts. First and as most, Marie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marie, better known as Anxiety. I also, if you guys so kindly will not point out, have lost my voice. So I'll be doing the best I gosh darn can. So what I do normally is I am a mental health focused and more streamer over on Mixer. So what I do is I either pick a mental health related topic or interview a professional or somebody with lived experience. So I bring my own lived experience to this panel, and I'm super excited to be here as always.
Joelle.
Hi, I'm Joelle Marie Nurse. I am a peer specialist and co-host of SPSM. And I guess what I can bring to the conversation is that I do have some personal experience with disordered eating, as well as those close to me who have had severe experiences with eating disorders. And I'm used to supporting people in various aspects of their life and with various kinds of distress.
Without further ado, hi, Katie. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing great. Thanks.
Tell the whole world. First off, if you don't know about Katie, shame on you. You're a son of a bitch. Tell the whole world, the whole SPSM Chat universe, galaxy, solar system, planet. Who is Katie Gordo?
I am a clinical psychologist. I was a professor for 10 years doing research on suicidal behavior and disordered eating. And about a year ago, I switched to a job where I do 90% therapy and 10% research. So I still often do clinical work with people who are experiencing different eating disorder symptoms and suicidal behavior, and do some research on that.
Tell the whole world why you are the coolest person in the world.
I don't know. Other people might better be able to answer that. I don't know that I'm the coolest person in the world, but I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
Joelle, why is Katie one of the coolest people in the world?
Okay, so one of the coolest people in the world. So she decided to wear her glasses, even though she couldn't get rid of the glare. Cool as fuck, Katie. You go.
Thank you. It really can't do without them. So
I feel that hard. I feel that hard.
There we go. So Before we get into our first question, I know we're running a little late, so let's check in with Twitter and let's see how they're doing over there. Again, if you're using there we go. If you're using Twitter, which I know is so popular with young people these days, make sure to use hashtag SPSM. Hello, Amber. How are you? Hello, Unforgiven Warrior. Hello, Dr. Catherine Gordon. How are you doing? Hey, Em. Hey, everyone. It's been a while. I'm BSW sociology student with lived experience coming to you from North Bay. You know what, Em? It's okay. Everyone needs to take a break. We're talking about suicide. That's heavy stuff, okay? And I know people got classes. There's a big football game going on, apparently. So you come back when you're ready to, and we'll be here with open arms, just like that Creed song. Hey, Michelle, who is quickly becoming one of our most popular, but our biggest evangelist. Michelle is constantly bringing on new people, fellow social workers, fellow psychologists. So shout out to Michelle Fortunato Kewen. I hope I'm getting that right. School social worker by day, and at UBSSW, hashtag DSW, student by night. Oh, my old job. I'm here to learn and connect with other SPSM folks. Last Sunday night was not the same because I am so, you know what? I take personal responsibility for that. We had to celebrate a colonial murderous holiday that week, apparently. I celebrated by revolving sushi with Joelle. So, again, I apologize. I know people need it. They need the suicide prevention social media chat. And it's okay. We're here. I know last week we were gone and your hearts were empty. But let's make up for that this week with Dr. Katie Gordo talking about eating disorders and shit. So let's get on to question number 1. And there's the crisis lines for you as well. I know we have to get as many diverse crisis resources. So if there's anyone else that you know out there, in social media land, please feel free to share, DM at SPSM Chat. Our DMs are open, so feel free to slide in anytime. Question number 1. How can eating disorders lead to suicide? Let's get to you, Dr. Katie.
Hi there. So there are a lot of different pathways that eating disorders lead to suicide. One of the main ones is that eating disorders are associated with a lot of emotional pain. They can be difficult to treat. It's not uncommon to struggle with access to good care. There are struggles trying to get insurance to cover adequate care for people with eating disorders. So when you're struggling with an eating disorder and on top of that, you're struggling to get access to care, it can lead to a sense of hopelessness, which can increase the likelihood that someone starts considering suicide. So that's definitely one of the pathways where it happens.
Now let me ask you, Katie, Catherine, Doc Gordon, Commissioner Gordon, whatever you prefer. Why the interest in eating disorders, you personally?
Well, I was really I started off interested in depression when I was in college, but I had peers that had struggled with eating disorders. There are people that I knew throughout time who had kind of struggled with bulimia, anorexia, binge eating disorder. And I was actually in judo when I was a teenager and when I was in middle school, and there are weight requirements for that. So I actually saw a lot of people engaging in disordered eating behaviors to cut weight and things like that. And so I got really interested in the impact that had on people, especially after learning, I mentioned depression. Depression, of course, is very painful. We do have a lot of treatment options for it. With eating disorders, some of our best treatments are kind of moderately helpful. Often people, they get better, but they'll relapse. And so I saw that there was a huge need to better understand eating disorders so that we could help people who are suffering with it. So I kind of started moving towards that direction in college.
Now, can we do an episode on judo and suicide prevention with you in the near future?
Certainly.
Awesome. There it is. What say you, Marie Shanley, aka Anxiety?
So I myself, I'm going to go off of my lived experience like I do for most of these chats. For me, having an eating disorder was one of the few ways that I was able to control what was going on with me. And it was something, as I wanted to end my life, it was a way to it was a way to cause myself harm without knowing or thinking that really it could lead to my life ending. It did bring me to the brink of, I started feeling so unwell that I knew that if I continued in that direction, I definitely would have had to been hospitalized. Sorry. But so how does it lead to suicide? It's down that same path of self-harm, attempting to control your feelings and emotions through self-harm. And, that's just a hop skip away from doing something even more drastic. And suicidal ideation definitely came hand in hand with that for me.
By the way, shout out to Marie for coming up with all the questions this week. That made my job so much easier.
Oh my God. I just knew what I was going to ask somebody who's a professional. All the questions are really to Katie. I mean, I love you, Joelle Marie, and I love you, Rudy, but I was like, what do I want to know from somebody who's like super, super fancy and's got a degree about this? So
yeah, when I booked Katie, when I booked her for SPSM Chat, I knew that I had to have Marie on as co-host because you two you're going to be best friends for life. Okay.
Sure. Yeah, probably. I mean, chances are. Yeah.
We just followed each other on Twitter, so I think that's the first step.
That is the first step to BFF.
For the Anxiety and Dr. Katie show.
It's happening. It's already on the books. Don't worry about it.
There we go. We got any new comments or anything? In fact, I love the love from Mixer. I know you're here because of Marie, and that is totally fine. I will take that free publicity from Marie. I appreciate that. I appreciate
it's not free, everybody. I get paid $1 million per episode. He's lying.
Awesome. I'll give you a faulty Elgato key light while we're at it. Hey, Brandon T. Saxon, how are you? What say you to question number 1, Joelle Marie? Can we throw that up on the screen again for those following along at home?
How can eating disorders lead to suicide? Well, so I have OCD, and stuff that I don't usually talk about is like my disordered eating patterns that I definitely used to have. Not so much anymore, but it definitely tied up with, first of all, how much I weighed, and that really focused on the numbers. But then also it started to be when I started having allergy issues that tied into OCD. And so how did that lead to suicidal thoughts? Well, I just thought I was bad all the time, and I couldn't explain to people like what I thought about my body. And other people, when I was really, really thin, started commenting that, oh, I'm so thin, and like I look great now. And there are a lot of difficult things going on with that. I just felt alone. I felt very alone, and I couldn't explain to anybody what was going on. And that really led to some suicidal thinking.
Any follow-ups, Katie?
Yeah, I think, thank you both for sharing your experiences. Social isolation is a huge factor with eating disorders. I think that people can reinforce eating disorders by telling people they look good while not realizing that eating disorders are serious and that people are struggling and in a lot of pain. I think that people overestimate how much control people have when they have an eating disorder. They think they can just stop or let go of it. And that can be really isolating. Also, if you are not, if you're very controlling about what you eat or secretive about what you eat, that actually can take you out of a lot of social situations, going out to eat, going to parties, things like that. And so that social isolation is a huge risk factor, along with one other thing, which is the idea that if you're hurting yourself repeatedly, then the idea of hurting yourself to kill yourself might not seem as fearsome as it might to other people. If someone's had anorexia, for example, they've withstood a lot of physical pain through overexercising, through overriding their hunger, and that can make them actually at higher risk for killing themselves should they start thinking about suicide.
Does it ever come as a surprise to any of the people you talk to, Katie, about like, oh my God, like, are you kidding me? Like eating disorders can lead to suicide?
I think that the high rates of people who have eating disorders that have had suicide attempts really do surprise people. I think that most people think about eating disorders when they do kill people being related to medical consequences of extreme starvation or affecting people's organs, things like that. They don't think about suicide, but it is the second leading cause of death among people with anorexia. And so it's definitely up there and something that should be on the radar of anyone who has a loved one with an eating disorder or who's doing clinical work with someone who has an eating disorder, they should regularly check in with that person and try to address and help them with the pain that's leading to that suicidal thoughts.
Before we get into question number 2, let's get into Twitter. Let's keep scrolling down. Or is it up? I forget. Hey, Jeanette, also another one of our MVPs. I appreciate you. Again, here we go. To question number 1, Jeanette's answer is when people aren't able to access treatment or are feeling like it's impossible to feel better from their disordered eating. M says, it isn't something I talk about a lot, but I'm also recovered from, I believe this is eating disorder, not otherwise specified. It was a way to harm myself in addition to cutting, and it was definitely suicidal at some points, knowing it could eventually kill me, but like anxiety, control had a big factor for me too. Hashtag SPSM, you're doing it right. Joelle Marie says, a feeling of being the only one going through it, a lot of pressure and anger from those around you when experiencing eating disorders, and a feeling of lack of control, often a big factor. Honestly, not having good nutrition can really affect cognition, so coping though. Oh, Brandon says, hello, I'm a clinical psychology postdoc in Minnesota, tuning in tonight to hear Dr. Gordon's wisdom. She's awesome. I agree. I wonder how you met her. Joelle says, so FYI, everyone, I have a puppy right here that I'm trying to keep occupied. I'm not just being odd for no reason. Unlike usual. Usually I'm just doing stuff with no puppy. Aren't we all? Michelle says, not an expert, but I have personal experience because eating diagnoses are complex issues. Most people also have to manage issues related to self-esteem, anxiety, depression, along with diagnosis-ordered eating. If they don't feel like they're getting better, suicide may seem like a real option. Shout out to Michelle for maximizing that 256 character limit on Twitter. Okay, so yes, that is very impressive. Okay, question number 2, and that is, how does current culture lead to eating disorders? We'll take it back to you, Dr.
Okay, well, I think this is a great question, and I think there's one component that I think a lot of people think about, and then there are some others that maybe are being considered more broadly in eating disorders. The first is overvaluing weight, shape, and appearance, and that's gone on for a very long time. With social media, often people are targeted with ads for various things focused on how they look. There's a whole big diet industry and other beauty products that can really help, well, not help, but hurt people by having them focus on their appearance more than maybe they even would before that. So I think that's a big thing, is just overvaluing and having these ideas that you're a good person if you're thin, if you look a certain way. The second thing I would argue has to do more with emotions and interpersonal connections. Something we found a lot in eating disorders is that it's definitely about eating and body image, but sometimes it goes beyond that, and that people, for example, who don't have a lot of friends or who have trouble relating to others tend to be more at risk for eating disorders. Sometimes they think that they'll fit in better if they look differently. Other times they have emotions, and they can receive a cultural message that they're not supposed to talk about being upset, or it's not okay to be upset. And so they may turn to something like binge eating or some other way to cope with their feelings. And so I think the main cultural factors are how we treat emotions and also how we overvalue weight and shape.
Marie?
This one hits very, very, very close to home. And Joelle Marie kind of touched upon this already, which is just the current culture. If you lose weight, people will tell you like, oh, well, you look so great now. Why, and if you say, so what happened to me is I started taking a medication and I lost a lot of weight, and I actually felt really sickly and unwell. And people were telling me that I looked great. And I was like, you wouldn't want to lose weight this way because it really wasn't a healthy way of losing weight. And they were like, what are you talking about? But you look amazing now. And that really, I remember like having been in a better state of mind than I was when I was 14, 15, 16 and going through an eating disorder. Like it really resonated with me that the kid back then would have taken that comment and been like, awesome. I'm going to keep doing this. This is great. Like I was waiting. I was craving for anybody to tell me that I looked thin that day, that it was worth it, that I just went and purged my entire lunch or dinner or whatever it was. Like that whole notion that we need to have, it's a form of validation. Our bodies and what we look like gives us such a strong form of validation socially, that having that feeling like you have that control over it plays a huge part in reinforcing it and continuing to pursue that eating disorder. And that's a nightmare. So culturally, we just, and kind of what Dr. Gordon said, we're just so preoccupied with our weight and how we look and how other people look and how specifically on the thinner side people look, that like the two are just so intertwined. And it's been something that I've been pretty vocal about and written essays about. And yeah, like my entire life, I've just grown up, and my body has been a source of, like, I grew up in a big Greek family, and it was always a source of like, oh, look, she's changing her body. It's like, it was a very publicly commented on thing since I was very young. And so like I remember gaining a little bit of weight when I turned like 13 or 14 and was going through puberty. And like my uncle had said, he's like, you look good now, but if you keep gaining weight, nobody's going to want to marry you. And so I know that that's not the only culture in which that happens. And so the two are just so intermeshed. And that's why I wanted to ask this question.
Joelle?
Sorry, I have to pop it back up. Thank you. How does current culture lead to eating disorders? So I definitely think lookism, sizeism, and for me, there was a lot of interplay with, I've always been tall. Like I am 5'9", and I've always had big shoulders, and I started really hardcore swimming when I was like 5. So first of all, I was always around other females in bathing suits, and that was a little difficult, just naturally being bigger. But because I was bigger and taller and strong, like I didn't feel feminine. I didn't feel girly. Like I did not feel pretty. And especially when you're an adolescent, like there's not a lot of understanding that like being feminine or being beautiful or any of that it can be in a 5'9" woman. I don't know, like that was my experience, and I just always felt clunky and too big and like taking up too much space. So I was never diagnosed with an eating disorder, but I've definitely had extremely disordered eating, and I probably could have used a lot of support. So one of the things that happened is, like Marie, I went on certain medications, and then I had some allergy issues, and I went on a different diet, and the combination of those plus depression meant I lost like almost half my weight. And I didn't feel good. Like all my body felt weak, and like I just didn't recognize myself. Like I touched my neck one time and it felt like thin and frail, and but people were telling me, oh my God, you look so good, blah, blah, blah. Like, you don't need to go on a diet. My family was going on a diet, like explicitly pointing me out as the person who doesn't need to watch what they eat, things like that. And it just felt disgusting. So all of that stuff, the idea that we need to be thin and little and frail, and that like being big is either lazy or a moral judgment or ugly, is definitely contributed to everything. And then when I had the issue where I was really, really thin, it just like reinforced, like, I don't even want to change this medication. I don't want to look at my diet again. Like, I don't want to do any of these things because I'm being treated differently. Like, and it is a total mind fuck. Done.
Well, you definitely look much brighter this week.
What? Brighter?
You know where she lives. Take it back. Take it back. Take it back.
Question number 3. Why are eating disorders? Look, I'm not even doing it. I'm using no hands. Why are eating disorders romanticized in our culture? Look, I'm not even using my hands. Let's go to Dr. Katie.
Hello.
Hi.
How'd you do that? So I think that whoops, I'm sorry. Sorry, I had a slight Okay, why are they romanticized? I think there are a couple of things. I think one is that the looksism that was just talked about. I just think that attractiveness is prized throughout time and has been for a long time, but in certain cultures, it can be elevated and contributed by media. There's research on that. In terms of cultures that had less exposure to media and then have more, you do see an increase in eating disorder rates. In addition to that, I think that we have in the United States a certain amount of admiration for what's perceived as self-discipline associated with eating disorder behavior, depending on the type of eating disorder behavior. So I think there's a lot of stigma and with binge eating, and that's not romanticized. However, I have heard, and maybe other people are tuning in have heard this before, I've actually heard people say they wish they had anorexia or they had it for a brief period of time because they think that shows that they have the willpower that's so prized to override their need to eat, and that would make them look better. And I always think it's really not like that. It's extremely painful. It's a very difficult disorder. It's just that it happens to be wrapped up on something that the culture values, which is high self-discipline and appearance to a certain extent. So that's why I think it's romanticized. I think some people also, again, just don't understand how it can cause so much suffering. They just think about it as someone who is dieting or something like that, rather than understanding the extent it goes to.
Now, today, December 8th, 2019. Do you, Dr. Gordon, do you ever have these thoughts like, oh my God, I don't like my body, or like, what if like I can do this to like as a shortcut or so-and-so to lose weight? Is that something you deal with even fleetingly?
Yeah, of course I do. I think it's very hard to, I think, sadly, if you look at the research on this, most women and many men struggle with body image and engage in dieting, and people who are clinical psychologists are not immune from that. Even if we, just because we have the knowledge of what it can do, it doesn't make it easier to do that. So I struggle like most people do. I have some tools to push back on struggles with body image that maybe other people don't have if they haven't either had training or been in treatment or read about as much as me, but that doesn't mean the thoughts aren't there. There is a lot of pressure to look a certain way. In my age, when you're away from friends for a long period of time and you're going to see people again after you haven't seen them in a while, that is definitely a time when I think a lot of us think about body image. So yeah, I still struggle with that too.
Marie?
The romanticization of it is another long-standing thing. Like I remember as a kid, I had said to one of my parents, "Oh my gosh, I overate," and they had literally told me that, well, if you want to stay skinny, you can just go and get rid of that. Like it was so normalized that like bulimia, like it was. Me falling into bulimia was almost like, well, yeah, of course, where else was she supposed to go? Like what? That was the coping mechanism that I was taught. I overate, then that's what I was supposed to do. And then it became, about control and all that other stuff that I mentioned before. But the romanticization of it, that the willpower, like Dr. Gordon was saying, is so huge, that there's this idea that people are overweight just because they just don't have enough willpower. Like that's the reason. It's just because they're either lazy or they just don't try hard enough. And so people who are doing this to their bodies, like I think we do not talk enough. Part of the problem is we do not talk enough about what seriously happens when you have an eating disorder. And is it cool if I go into it a little bit? So one of the things, okay, I'm just going. One of the things that happened that nobody warned me about. People were just like, yeah, you just throw up if you want to be skinny, or you don't eat, and those are both solutions. Or you overexercise, and you're like, yeah, what's the worst that's going to happen? I'm going to be hungry. That sounds fine. I could totally do that in the name of this body that I'm supposed to have. But in the reality, what happened, at least to me, and I have heard this from other people as well, because of my bulimia, my teeth turned yellow, my hair became frail, the back of my throat was constantly burning. I developed GERD, so acid reflux. I developed IBS. I had so many digestive issues that I'm still dealing with. I have not been able to have milk, coincidentally, since the fact that since I started purging. There's a lot of things that are tied to that. Like, I remember those exact moments where I was like, if I don't stop doing this, I could really do a lot of harm to myself, and still being like, no, but I have to do it because this is what feels right. And it was just so okay, and it was so normalized to me, and it was so like, that's the thing to do if you want to, in the name of this higher thing, that it seemed worth it. The fact that I was putting my body, and it was in terrible shape, and I would go to gastroenterologists, and I would go to my general doctor, and they'd be like, why is this happening? I'd be like, I have no idea. I must have really bad digestion, and I knew exactly what I was doing.
Before I get to Joelle, I just want to give a quick shout out to Known Wells, who is watching on Periscope. I see you. He's also struggled with eating disorders and talks about it a lot on his podcast, You, Me, Empathy. We're going to have him on as a guest on SPSM Chat in the near future. So be on the lookout for that. Joelle Marie, what say you? Why are eating disorders romanticized in our culture?
First, I want to say hi, Known, too. Hi. Why are eating disorders romanticized in our culture? I think, definitely it's a means to an end. And the end is things that I have mentioned, like this idea of, and honestly, like masculinity, too. So feminine looks a certain way, masculine looks a certain way. And there are very specific body types. And if you do not naturally have that body type, you should do whatever you can to pursue that. So having willpower, which people think that's what an eating disorder is, that you have extreme willpower, like that's all it is. And that's, in what I've seen and experienced, that's why people can get really angry, because it's treated as something that you're wanting to do, even if you are in the extreme grips of it, even if you are in the hospital, things like that. And I think, eating disorders are romanticized because we romanticize a lot of things that are just so harmful for us, as long as it gets to where we want to be. And it's really fucked up. Yep.
You're only allowed one fuck on SPSM Chat a week.
I never say it, so I get like 3 more.
Before we get on to question number 4, I want to check out the Twitter chat and see what our lovely human beings on there have to say as well. Hey, Rosie, how are you doing in response to question number 2? Especially when folks are also experiencing an anxiety, it can be easier to see today's body ideals as good and anything outside the norm as bad. Michelle says to question number 2, also, it's hard for other cultures to believe that they have an eating diagnosis because of the stereotype that it only affects white females. Awesome points, as always. Rosie says the holiday season can be especially challenging when friends, family, others make unsolicited comments about our bodies, no matter the size. That's a good reason why I didn't visit my family these holidays. Anya says, this is in response to question number 1. I just finished why people die by suicide. It mentioned eating disorders multiple times, good for them, such as linking anorexia with elevated pain thresholds, which is also shown in those with a history of suicide attempts. Jackie, how are you? I think this might be one of your first times. If not, I am totally wrong. Pop culture has this idea of what the ideal woman or man looks like. There are so many diet and workout plans that send the message that skinny is best, which can lead to unhealthy decisions. Katie Gordon says, pulling double duty. Judo and suicide was mentioned by Rudy Caseres. That would be me. After I talked about my experiences in judo and weight loss behaviors I observed in my peers. There was a recent heartbreaking loss of Jack Haddon in judo by suicide, and she shares the link. I'll try to retweet that from the SPSM Chat account. Thank you, Katie. Jackie says, definitely one thing that bothers me so much when I see extended family members is that the first thing they say is, Hi, you gained weight and somehow that's not supposed to affect me at all. Jeanette, still on question number 2, the typical size of chairs in public and some sizes of clothing being labeled quote unquote plus are 2 examples in our culture. Right on. Jackie says, yes, definitely. It makes it harder to want to see family since that's the first comment they make. Michelle, in response to, I'm not going to have time to answer all these, read all these tweets, but I appreciate all of you. Michelle says, TV makes it seem like this is an easy way to lose weight, where in reality, eating disorders are not just about weight. Our society is very focused on negative weight and diet talk, especially during the holidays. We also have to look at the messages being sent to athletes as well. I appreciate Anna for sharing the National Institute of Health link. Make sure to look at that and check that out. Katie Gordon says, Ronda Rousey is another judoka who has been outspoken about her suicidal thoughts and acted as a mental health advocate. I'll have you know, Dr. Katie, I'm a 3rd dan in judo. So how about that?
I did not know that. That's really impressive.
Yes, working on 2nd dan. Rosie Nowder says, if that's true, people in bigger bodies with disordered eating are often dismayed or not assessed properly. How are you doing so much at the same time, Katie? I'm jealous of you. I'm struggling just to like scroll on Twitter. Okay, question number 4, and that would be, is there better messaging that can be used to reduce eating disorders prevalence? Katie?
Yeah, I think one of the big things is disentangling the idea that your body weight is your worth or reflects your character as a person. There's a lot of bias against overweight people, and it makes sense that we respond, especially people who are vulnerable due to genetics, family history, are going to respond to messages of fear if they're told that being fat or gaining weight is a huge problem. And so that fear develops and it drives eating disorders. And so I think that an important message is that you can be healthy with exercising and eating well, and that doesn't necessarily correspond to your weight. And so it doesn't have to, because we know through eating disorders, people can have lower weight, higher weight. They can be in all different places and not be healthy. And so I think it's helpful to refocus on healthy eating and exercise that feels good to the person and kind of move the focus away from weight. And then the second part of it is to really pay attention and catch ourselves when we're overly focused on appearance in ourselves and in other people. I think that valuing appearance, the way to push back on that is to value people as worthy due to other things, their interests, other things that are more relevant to it. And so I think the messaging can go around that. And I guess one other thing is I really think being bombarded by dieting ads and other things focused on appearance, they get to people. And so trying to more critically pay attention or evaluate, how is this impacting me? When I go on Instagram and I see, these people, many of them using filters to look a certain way or say something, how's it impacting me? And if it's impacting you negatively, you can change that. You can block those ads and give feedback to it that the messaging is problematic to you.
What is your personal favorite Instagram filter, Katie?
My Instagram doesn't have a lot of pictures of people in it, so it's probably a pretty boring one. It's mostly pictures of trees and flowers and stuff like that. So,
Personally, I'm a Valencia man. What say you, Marie?
Hefe, personally, but yeah. In turn,
Hot take.
Hot take. In terms of prevalence and messaging, the good part and the bad part about social media is that you can filter out quite a bit of negative messaging out of your feed. You can start following people who are activists for positive body messaging. You can start following models who endorse and promote other models who, do not promote like random teas and shakes and all that garbo that promotes disordered eating. There's a lot of things that you could do to just filter through your social media feed to make it less about this kind of negativity. And then Dr. Gordon talked about the fact that like you can comment on ads and stuff like that. I personally, in terms of what else we could do in our day-to-day lives, I think is pointing out, one of the things that I have done when I like as a camp counselor, as an aunt, I have made sure to point out good messages to younger girls. So like those Dove campaigns are fantastic, right? American Eagle has a really, really good advertising campaign now, and they promote all kinds of bodies in their ads. So like really supporting brands and supporting advertising, and showing younger women that this is what you should be looking at. This is what it's healthier. This is what we want to be promoting, and kind of steering away from the other stuff. That's what I think is ultimately going to do a good job, is us helping filter all of that junk out, because I don't know that it's going away anytime soon.
We have to have a talk about summer camp someday, Marie.
Let's do it right now. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Go.
So Dr. Gordon, how was your time in summer camp as a kid or as an adult?
Overall positive.
Uh-oh.
Joelle?
Oh, Rudy, is there a deep, dark secret that we're about to not want to learn about?
Yes, but that will be reserved for SPSM Chat after hours, which people will have to pay for
Oh my God.
to join us for.
Subscription service. Is it me? Am I going on?
Yes.
Okay.
We're back to serious conversation.
Okay. Is there better messaging that can be used to reduce eating disorders prevalence? Yes, and there's things that we need to stop doing. I think that starting from when kids are really young, whether they're boys or girls or non-binary, however they are identifying, I think we need to teach people and children to value their bodies and love their bodies. And like, that was something that was so hard for me for a very long time. And then I decided I didn't want to feel like shit anymore. And I actively started looking at things that I liked about my body. Now I like my tummy. Like, I like having my stomach. Like, I like rubbing it. And that sounds really hard to do, and it is. But when I was 9 years old and I was doing softball and really competitive swimming, like going to practices before school, I was still told I was like fat. Like, yeah, I was chubby, but I was also 9 and I'm doing constant athletic things. This is just like, I don't talk about this stuff very often, so I'm being extreme, but don't tell kids they're fat or like they should hate their bodies. Don't put them on diets. Don't call them chubby and poke their tummies. Like, that's not nice. And it's not good to like invade kids' space. And I actually think that's a problem too, is that we invade kids' very personal body space. And so we make their bodies things that they can't be attached to and have control over, and they can't love for their own. Like, they always have to hug people. They always have to present themselves in certain ways, and it's just not okay. Other messaging is to value the food that we're eating for its energy, like what it's doing good for our bodies. And that's tricky, because if somebody is in the extreme throes of an eating disorder, it's very hard to present that. So I'm not saying during then, but just in general, like, what is this food getting to me? But also being able to enjoy food. I didn't enjoy food for a very long time, and it sucked. And I think it's perfectly fine to be enjoying food, to like really celebrate the things that we're eating and really celebrate our bodies. Babble.
It's actually pretty easy. It's actually pretty easy to rub your belly.
Yeah. Yeah, right?
Everybody do it right now.
Yes.
No, just me. All right, Joelle Marie is a good guy. Is a good champion. All right, sorry. Go ahead.
I agree. Before we get into final thoughts, let's get back to Twitter and let's see how they are doing. We're having quite the conversation over there. I really appreciate you. Jeanette says, generate resources for parents to use when talking to their children about food and bodies. It starts really, really early. Jeanette also goes on to support organizations like Help That Every Size. I know them. Anne Marie O'Brien, welcome. Significantly more women than men experience eating disorders. Why is that? What does that tell us about the messages we give girls and women? Rosie says, absolutely. I think it's also helpful for clinicians, as it's been for me, to know of body positive role models like at Jamila Jamil, at
Yes.
Mary's Cups of Tea, and at Body Positive Panda. I'm going to check those out. Okay, so before we get into final thought, let's get into final thoughts because Danielle's not able to join us by way of video, but she did send us some photos. So I'm going to try to get those on. But before I do that, let's get to final thoughts. Let's go with Marie.
My final thoughts. I actually, can I ask a question? I know we don't have a lot of time. If we can
Sure,
get to it, Dr. Gordon, I would like to know, is it really true that more women and girls experience eating disorders than men? Because I feel like it's another one of those things like other mental health issues where men just don't talk about it, but it's quite prevalent in that population as well.
Yeah, that's a great question. With anorexia and bulimia, that disproportionate kind of rates is totally true, where women and girls are much more likely to have anorexia and bulimia, and that could be due to a number of different factors. When it comes to binge eating, the disparity is not as big. You do tend to see kind of more even rates of binge eating across men and women. In all of those cases, though, it doesn't seem to be just about expressing it. Though it's completely true that boys who are suffering from eating disorders tend to go under-recognized because it is less common. They can also feel additional shame about it because they feel like that's a girl thing and they feel like that they might get teased about that. And so I think it's really important to pay attention to what drives their eating disorder behavior too. It's often the same thing as girls and women. Caring about appearance, muscularity, and trauma, all types of other issues that put them at risk. So that difference does seem to be true. And I think that fortunately there have been more men speaking out about their experiences with eating disorders that kind of gets at that concern you mentioned, which is that people are just not sharing or they're not seeking help. And so I think there is some improvement in that direction, but we could use a lot more.
Does that satisfy you, Marie?
Well, it does, and also thank you for the person on Twitter who asked that question originally. My only closing remark is, listen to kids. I think it's the same remark I have every time. Like, listen to kids and take them more seriously, especially, and like don't call them fat. I'm gonna join Joelle's. I'm gonna piggyback on Joelle. Don't call them fat. That's not cool. And don't make it that fat is a bad thing either, which is me empathy said that, and piggybacking off of that too.
I agree. Joelle, final thoughts?
I always. So recently, like the past several years, I've made like a very conscious choice that like I did not want to continue to be controlled by food and my diet and my body. And that's been very hard because I have had some allergy intolerance issues. But really one of those things that I did was starting to call myself fat and telling other people to stop thinking it's bad. So when I say don't call kids fat, I mean like don't tell them their bodies are bad, because I don't actually think fat is a bad thing. Like when I call myself fat and other people are like, oh no, but you're pretty. I'm like, why not both? So I think it's really, I had to go through some very, very active mind tricks to get myself to like my body and to get myself to enjoy food again, and to get myself to not buy into the idea that I have to be thin and frail and make myself sick to be pretty and feminine, which is what I want to be and what I am. And I have to say it was very, very hard, and I didn't have a lot of support. And if you are trying to do that, keep trying, because your body is beautiful. You are beautiful. It is worth it. And don't worry that it's really hard. Just keep trying. It's going to be hard.
So sadly, Danielle Glick, Dr. Glick, one of our favorite co-hosts in the world, one of, I guess, 5, can't be here today, but she sends us Aaron Carter photos. That's funny that it replaces me.
But do you want to sing for us now? No?
Everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah. There. He still looks good. I mean, I'll take
good for
that.
him.
So yeah, Danielle wants to stress that she is not going to sleep with Aaron Carter tonight, but maybe her friend Dr. Stephanie Sampson will.
She should be working harder at
After
it.
hours.
Yeah.
I don't know. Let's get that off the screen. Let's never put that on there again. Dr. Gordon, I was just joking about the Stephanie Sampson thing. She only has a Master of Sciences, not a doctorate. Final thoughts, Dr. Katie.
Final thought. My final thought is that eating disorders are severe, painful illnesses, and it puts people up. It gets so painful and severe that people think about killing themselves and are at higher risk for killing themselves. So if you have friends or you yourself are struggling with an eating disorder, please think about your worth that's not related to your weight. That's hard to do on your own. So your friends and family members really need to step in and help and remind you of all the value that you have that's not related to your weight, and to try to get you some help and working through that. It's important that you feel supported. We know that that's a protective factor from suicide and eating disorders. So especially if someone's struggling with an eating disorder, if you can be sympathetic, non-judgmental, listen to them, ask them how you can support them, that can go a long way to give people hope and to improve their lives.
And how can people connect with you?
They can follow me on Twitter at Dr. Catherine Gordon, which is on the screen. I have a website, catherinehgordon.com, which has links to some other things in there. It has my email on there. Feel free to email me if you have any questions. I saw Brandon Saxon was chiming in. He's the co-host of a podcast we used to have called Jedi Council, which Rudy was on. We loved having you on, talking about lived experience. And that's still available too. You can get to that through my website or on iTunes. And so that's another way to connect.
Yes, I also appreciate you listing on your website that among the media, the various places that you've been interviewed, really grown-up shows. Among them, you listed No Restraints with Rudy Caseres, which is my previous show.
Which is a very grown-up show. It's a very grown-up show.
It's very good. It's a great show. The fact that you're having those conversations and reaching so many people, and it was great having you on. You really kept me on my toes, made sure I answered some important questions. So.
Well, you did equally, if not better, this time. So I'm glad we have you on. The only sad thing now is that we're going to have to wait a while to have you back on. I wish we could have you on every week, and it's very sad that we can't.
Oh, thank you, Rudy.
So before we wrap things up, let's take it back to the Twitter chat one last time, because I know people are bringing the fire over there. Thank you, Krista Marie, for being our SPSM Chat live stream producer. She's the person moving all the moving parts behind the curtain. If you want to help moderate our SPSM Chat, that was Krista's previous role, but she has since graduated. But if you would like to take over the reins, it just really just involves just retweeting and liking everything and putting out some links every now and then if we discuss something. So it's super easy. DM at SPSM Chat if you'd be down for that. It's we are Sundays, obviously, every Sunday except for colonial murderous holidays. Every Sunday, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And we are also on Facebook.com/SPSM Chat, Twitter.com SPSM Chat, which is what you're watching right now, YouTube.com/SPSM Chat, Mixer.com/SPSM Chat, and all shows are archived at SPSMchat.com. So thanks again for all of your wonderful tweets, as well as being a guest on the show, Katie. I support you, Jeanette, as well. Keep joining us. Anne Marie O'Brien. I appreciate you, Rosie, as well. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you to everyone else, especially you, Michelle. But I appreciate all of you. Oh, yes. And thank you also, Anya. If you're not able to watch live, that's totally fine as well. Like I said, all shows are archived, not only on the various social platforms we are on, but also on SPSMchat.com. I appreciate it. I love this topic. People always ask, why don't I speak more? It's because I know so little, but I'm very good at pulling it off that I know stuff. But about eating disorders, disordered eating, is that I've dealt with body image issues my entire life. I've had massive weight gain, massive weight loss. And it's funny because I've dealt with the, oh, you've gotten fat and all this stuff. Like I gained over 100 pounds in a year not too long ago. And then I lost 100 pounds within a year. And it's actually it's quite fascinating to put it lightly, the kind of comments you get when the weight gain rises and also as the weight is lost. And now I'm starting to gain a little bit more weight, but I'm also getting a lot more exercise. I'm not trying to starve myself anymore, so I'm not as worried as I used to be. But yeah, it's definitely hard. Definitely I'm not getting as many comments as I used to about how great I look, and that is what it is. So I really appreciate us being all able to talk about this openly and honestly. And again, I can't say enough good things about you, Katie. I'm glad you came on. I'm glad that you were all here. Thank you so much, Marie. Thank you so much, Joelle. Thank you so much, Anime. Thank you so much, Danielle. And thank you so much, Hudson, who is also off this week. We will be back next Sunday, December 15th, for an all-new hashtag SPSM Chat with guest Heather Funk Palacios, founder of Wonderful. We're going to be talking about bipolar and, surprise, suicide. Until then, hold your piggies close.
Look at the puppy.